I'm starting my evening live interview, and today it's um, across the Atlantic with a young countertenor from New York, Logan Tanner. It's his first Instagram live, as for many of my speakers, and he will join us now. Logan. Hi, I'm waiting for my speaker. Yeah. Logan, hello
Hello.
from St. Petersburg.
Hello.
Well, from all the bad things we have been encountering, the good thing is the connection with the
Yeah,
people all over the world. So even while still being in kind of half lockdown, I'm connecting with people all around the world.
that's so cool. Yeah, I really love what you're doing.
Well, could you briefly say, have this weeks been productive for you in terms of singing and not losing the motivation to continue?
You know, actually, this week and recently has been a lot better because we are seeing, for me, I see progress in the world. So that makes me feel a little bit more hopeful in
Mhm.
terms of career and getting back on the stage and all of that. In the beginning, it was actually more difficult for me, at least, to continue on because it seemed so dreadful.
Mhm.
The circumstances seemed not so great. So lately, I've been doing actually quite well, considering things seem to be progressing in a way. I mean, it won't be back to normal for quite some time, but it seems things are getting better. So that's actually really great.
Can you practice, say, without a teacher and not in a concert hall? Were you able to arrange your practice with Zoom and at your home?
Well, I do when I have like with my teacher and my coaches, I do have to see them via Zoom right now. But it actually isn't so different. Um, it's not so horrible. I mean, granted, there whenever I do something with my voice teacher, I have a pianist with me in the room, so I can actually find where I live. There are like churches that will let me and one
Mm.
other person go into like their a hall or something, and I can Zoom, Zoom or FaceTime. It's kind of whichever someone prefers, but my teacher primarily uses Zoom. I just Zoom in with them, and then the pianist is on my connection, so there's no delay.
Mhm.
So I can um, we can still have a fairly similar lesson to when we could do it in person. It also works this way whenever I'm gone somewhere far away from my teacher and I wanted a lesson, we would do this as well. So we were kind of already acquainted with the
Mhm.
method of work. So it's not so different. It's not the most ideal, but it's actually quite good.
Oh, would you agree that after this period we will all be so tech savvy that maybe we'll stop doing half of the normal stuff that we have been doing?
I um I think that we will certainly see an increase in online productions or online media. I think we're all learning a lesson in the classical music world on how most everyone was not prepared for something like this, and their social media and online presence wasn't as strong as maybe it should have been,
Hmm.
because now that the audiences have gone, there's not a lot of money to build up these online platforms now,
Hmm.
as if they had prepared for this, and seen that this is the way the world is going, everything is going to be more online. If they had prepared for this sooner, I think we would be in a slightly better spot. Granted, of course, everything is better live. I'm not saying that we should replace live performance by any means, but I do think that we're all kind of learning a little bit from our lack of proactive action in terms of like media presence online. And there are lots of things that we could have done that could have prevented a total shutdown of the arts. I think, and we can talk about that more in depth later, but I think there are things that could have been done that could have maybe made this less severe.
That's a very interesting idea, because nobody thinks about whether they could have done something in the past, only think about now. That's a really interesting idea. But let's spend, say, 40 minutes on discussing your past and your biography. And I'm very interested in how does one choose this path of a singer. I actually have read an interview with you before we talk now, and it says that you actually had a husky voice and your parents were not sure you would make a singer. So I was wondering whether your path was a challenging one.
So, yeah, that is such a funny, that's like kind of my funny story. So I always wanted to be a singer since I was tiny child. But if you had known me when I was very young, 5, 6, I had the most husky hoarse voice that you could imagine. They're not really sure what caused that. They think maybe like juvenile acid reflux could have caused it. They weren't really sure. It also could have just been I learned how to speak with a husky voice just outright and didn't use proper breath support, and then I learned it later. But yeah, I did have a really hoarse voice, and no one really corrected it because they thought it was cute. Oh, this little boy has a really hoarse, like old man voice. It sounds kind of cute. At least that's what they said. I don't really know how cute it was, but but I wanted so badly to be a singer for whatever reason. I just would see singers on TV at church because I grew up in church. And my mom's best friend was actually classically trained opera singer as well. And I saw her sing, and she had an amazing voice. I mean, she still does have an amazing voice. She's still with us. But at that time I was like, oh, I want to do that. And I remember begging my mother, please let me have singing lessons. Please. I really want singing lessons. And she said, first you will do piano. You need to do piano first. And I don't really know if that's because she didn't think I could sing yet, or if she just wanted me to have a foundation of piano first. So I did start piano as a child first, but I still would just, please let me sing. I want to take singing lessons. I want to be in choir. And she didn't admit to me until much later in life that she was like kind of concerned, like, oh, I don't think you have the voice, because you just sound like you have laryngitis all the time. I don't know that it's going to be a pretty voice. But she did relent, and I did get voice lessons, and slowly the quality of my voice cleared up, and it was no longer, rough and coarse. It was
Can I ask? It is in America a career in music? Is it considered a path, like a normal path, or is it something extraordinary, bohemian, risky, so that people wouldn't encourage you to go there?
Oh, I would definitely say there's a lot of risk. My parents, though, however, were always quite supportive. But I remember being in college, and I grew up in a kind of a small town in Texas, no less, so near New York now. But at the time I was, in college, and then I went home back to Texas. And I remember my friend saying, are you really going to get a degree in music? And I was like, yeah, why wouldn't I? And they were like, well, it just seems really risky. Like, I wouldn't, why would you take such a risk? Why don't you just get something that's safe? And then if your singing career happens, it happens. But that's not really how I operate. I'm kind of a risk taker just in general. I'm not someone who likes to sit and play it safe, because ultimately that doesn't fulfill me. But it isn't for the, I would say the majority of people would say that getting a degree in vocal performance is a bit risky, is a bit out of the box. Not necessarily strange, but I think the word risky is the correct term for this. I think most people would discourage their kids. My parents never did, but I know some parents discourage their kids from doing an arts degree because it's not safe, you know.
Mhm. How disciplined should you be to really develop into a professional? I mean, uh, does it begin with 1 hour a day and then go into 5 hours a day? And do you, while practicing, do you have to learn scores, read things like how, in terms of proportion, how much of it is real voice training and how much of it is your education as a musician and ex expanding your knowledge of the history of music?
It's actually like a tenfold process, I would say. To be a really good musician, you definitely need to practice. I would say, now I don't practice singing 5 hours a day. The singers can't do that. I know instrumentalists. I have lots of friends who, play the piano or another instrument, and they do practice hours upon hours a day. I have a friend who knows a really, a really good up and coming clarinetist, and he practices sometimes all day on the clarinet. You could never do that with voice. You would have no voice. I think it was Lily Lemons that said that, the famous singer and pedagogue, who said, make sure not to sing so many hours in a day that you cannot sing the next.
Mm-hmm.
There's other things you can do. You can silent practice, score study. You can read articles on performance practice. There's a lot of things that go into it. So yeah, it's not just learning the voice. It's learning so many things. I think the most important thing is to become a well-rounded musician,
Mm-hmm.
know how to act, know how also to be a businessman or woman, because no one told me that in school.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be an entrepreneur, because I essentially am a product for people to buy. If they do not know that I'm out there, how will they buy it?
So basically, sort of, modesty is not a good way into business. Yeah, like sort of a silence, modesty, whatever.
Well, I think humility is important. People want to be around someone who is humble, but you definitely have to give it 150%. There is no waiting in the practice room for someone to discover you. That's never going to happen. They're not going to just be waltzing down the hall, most likely, and hear your amazing voice and make you a star. It almost never works like that. You have to do a lot of the work yourself, and I'm still doing all of that work now, especially now in times like these where you have to be even more creative. You have to create the opportunities for yourself before they start to fall in your lap. Renee Fleming, who is the world famous soprano, we all know her, or Anna Netrebko, or any of those people, they have built their careers so high because they're so talented, but they have done a lot of work to get there, so that now people just, contact them for concerts and stuff. But that's not how it started out for them. You have to really put in a lot of legwork early on, and really be creative and think out of the box, and really try to get your name out there and meet people. Some of the most important things I learned early on was to go to performances of other famous singers and see how they do it, one, why they are so successful, but meet them after, if you can. Because they often will meet you after. If you say, I'm studying music, or I've just graduated from conservatory or anything, I would really like to get to know you. They often will talk to you, because most people are pretty approachable. And that's how you figure out ways in. Because when I graduated, I had no idea how I was going to make it work. Yeah, I knew I needed to go on auditions, but how do I go on auditions? Who do I sing for? How do I get auditions? What happens if I don't have an agent right away? You know, what do you do then? You have to ask the questions, because they, at least in my experience, no one told me in school. I had to find this stuff outside of it by asking.
Well, you mentioned Anna Netrebko, and she was supported by the head of the Mariinsky Theater, Valery Gergiev, at the beginning of your career. And I wonder whether you have found a maestro or someone who is a representative of some institution who helped you and moved your career in a considerable way.
So yes, what happened with Anna Netrebko is extraordinary and wonderful. I would say that any successful performer has a support system of some type. Maybe not what Anna Netrebko has. That she has such a glorious voice and commanding presence. She almost is a star from birth, it would seem. But everyone would say someone helped them along, because it's such a difficult career that if you don't have a team of people, it's going to be, I feel, almost impossible to break in, because it's so cutthroat in a way. I would say that you need to have allies. You need to have a team of people. You need to build that network. It doesn't just come naturally. I know that with Anna Netrebko, it wasn't just him. I mean, he definitely, I think, is attributed to being the most help, but she did a lot of work. She's not just someone who got lucky. She did a lot of work, and she maintains her relationships with some of the greatest opera houses in the world. It's not just, it's not just Gergiev anymore. It's lots of people that still keep her on top, including herself, So you always need a team.
Well, now I want to delve into a specific of your voice. You have such a unique voice, and I wonder at which moment of your life you understood that you're not a tenor but a countertenor.
So this is actually a long process. So when I was in undergraduate, I was studying tenor, and it was coming along, but I would hear comments like, "Your voice is nice, but it's not spectacular." And I was thinking, well, not yet. But I knew something inside of me was telling me to continue on. I just didn't know why, and I just didn't know for what reason. So I listened to it. And then by the end of my undergraduate studies, I started to think, maybe tenor isn't quite right, because it just wasn't lining up. It wasn't consistent, actually. So I knew to be a working professional musician, your instrument needed to be pretty consistent. You needed to know what to expect and be able to reproduce it night after night, right? Mm-hmm. You don't want to have a singer who can sing well one night and then the next night it's a train wreck. That doesn't satisfy audiences. Oh, we heard him and he was great, and the next night, you need to be able to do that. And that's not how my tenor voice was. It was, sometimes all over the place, and other times it was lined up. And I didn't understand that. I just couldn't get especially in the high range, I couldn't get the high range, which is what the whole point of a tenor really, is to sing those high notes, and I couldn't get them to be consistent. So I asked my teacher, I have this other register that I sing quite strongly in, and I think they call them countertenors. And he told me, oh, but no one has careers like that anymore. So you shouldn't pursue that. And I thought to myself, oh, okay, that is an old voice type that has kind of died away. And to be truthful, it did die away for whatever reason. In America, we have a lot to thank for a few countertenors bringing it back in the late 1990s. There's of course David Daniels, the very famous countertenor. There's also Anthony Costanzo, who's singing now. Who
I've seen him in London in Ahmad.
Yes, Fabulous, fabulous. He's also very, very nice. I really enjoy him and really a sweet person. And then there's also Bejan Mehta, who mostly sings in Europe, but
I
is
also saw him. I saw him in Mithridat,
yeah, he is
Mozart's Mithridat.
he happens to be one of my bigger inspirations. I think he's such a fabulous artist and a very interesting person.
Mm-hmm.
And he's fantastic. I believe for in terms of American countertenors, we have those three people to kind of attribute the the revitalization of the art form, because for a while countertenors did cease to be in the regular repertoire for quite a bit.
But can I ask, isn't it counter-intuitional that the rare voices that should be nurtured and kind of people should be in awe when a new countertenor appears? You say that you were not even encouraged to develop a countertenor voice. I thought that your teacher would say, "Oh, you have countertenor. Let's look at that. Maybe
Well,
you."
that was one teacher. That was one teacher. And so for a while I just dropped it. I just took his word as like truth, because he was my kind of my first mentor in music. He said, "Oh, well, they don't really have careers like that. So don't worry about it. I mean, you can do it, and I was thinking at the time, well, I want to have a career." So I dropped it, and then I went to graduate school. And at graduate school, my teacher one day, I was singing in like a performance class, and another person got up and sang Ombre Mai Fu, and it's such a beautiful melody. It kind of gets caught in your head. And after the performance class, he caught me in the hallway singing it, and he goes, "How long have you been able to sing like that?" And I said, "Well, I mean, most of my life, I assume. I don't know. I just don't really sing it, though." And he's like, "Okay, learn the rest of that aria and bring it to me next week." And I did, and after I sang it for him, he told me, "You would be crazy to sing in any other way. This is where your voice should be. You would be crazy to pursue tenor when this is here. It's so much more beautiful and more accessible for you. And it seems easier, and it almost seems like you've been practicing this way your whole life," which in truth, I kind of was practicing on my own, but just for fun, in my house. I was just kind of singing in that voice up high. And I was just doing that. And then so I was, in a way, developing it without lessons. And, after he told me you should do this, I thought, okay, we're done. I will do this. And I've never looked back after that.
Can I ask something which doesn't click in my mind? You said that you had difficulty in reaching the higher notes in tenor, but countertenor was easy. To me, it seems not understandable.
Yeah, okay, so there are two different, so the vocal cords work with two sets of muscles, the thyroarytenoid and the cricothyroid. Men predominantly sing with a thyroarytenoid dominant production, which is a muscle within the vocal folds that creates your chest voice. So you have one too, where you speak. That's your thyroarytenoid muscle being dominant in your vocal production. However, when I sing with in falsetto, which is technically what we do, we just have a really loud one. Although some would call it head voice, it's not really. It's falsetto. Mine is stronger than maybe your average man. That is a cricothyroid dominant production. And with my voice, it seems, and there still needs to be a lot more research done on countertenors, because they're not really sure why some men can do it better than others, because it seems that also you either have it or you don't. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of room for development. Of course, there's room for developing the range and making it more beautiful and more free and easy. But in terms of like sound quality and volume capabilities and resonance, it's either you've got the capability or you don't. And that kind of just comes down to anatomy and how you're made and the gift you were given. So it seems for me, going back to your question on how it is easier to sing higher in a way, it's because I'm not having to carry my chest voice up really high.
Yes. I understand. Yes, yeah.
So my falsetto is just free and easy, and it can go all the way up, and there's no break or anything. It's carrying the chest voice up high that I wasn't able to really do, and I wasn't able to do it comfortably, and that's really kind of quite a big sign that you're singing in the wrong register if you can never figure out how to make it comfortable, and because it should not hurt. It should never hurt.
Now, can I ask a historical comparison question? Have you compared yourself to the arias that castrati were able to sing, and whether the modern countertenor is able to cover the whole range of that they were covering, say, in Handel's operas?
Okay, so in order to answer that question, I'll give you a little background on how the castrati were able to achieve their range. So as of course you know, they were men who were castrated before they reached puberty in order to preserve the voice. Most of the time, it still didn't save the voice. But
oh, really?
Yeah, most of the time it didn't. Most of the time it still messed up their hormones, and lots of bad things happened to them, which is why they weren't, everywhere. They were very famous, but they were kind of, the one in a million, the brightest shining star in the sky in a sense. So what happened with that is when you perform that operation on a male, it does stop their vocal cords from growing, because their vocal cords don't receive the hormone testosterone, which is what creates the thickening of the folds, which makes the voice deeper. But they still grow, and it's believed that they grew even taller than they would have because of the lack of hormones in their, like the change of hormones. Like they lost a lot of, ability to create hormones in their body and regulate them. So they would grow quite tall, but their heads would be somewhat smaller, but their lungs would swell to like twice the size of a normal person. So they had this incredible ability to sustain phrases that were almost unhuman. It was like, whoa, because they had the tiny little chords that could just come together like that really, really easily, super high pitches, and then they could sustain these long phrases without breath for forever, it seemed, unlike any other voice type. In that way, countertenors do not compare, because we are a changed voice. We are singing in falsetto, and we're not really sure what even they sounded like, but I would say that we might know soon what a castrati sounded like, because there are more and more trans singers. And if they are male to female, and as some of them are having these operations earlier and earlier in life, we may know what they sounded like. We may. I'm not 100% sure. I'm not really a doctor or anyone of science, but
so basically what you're saying, that this comparison is sort of unfair to a modern countertenor, because it's not a natural development of a voice that they had.
No, it's not a natural development. It's definitely something that was created, manufactured in a way. I mean, I think it's an adequate replacement. I think there are lots of beautiful countertenor voices. I think, though, that is what it is. It's a replacement for something that is kind of an inhumane practice, to ask a little boy, oh, well, your voice is really pretty. Let's do this operation so that you can keep it. When a child doesn't know that.
There was this film, Farinelli, yes, that went into this psychological tragedy of this person. Well, and how about alto? Because, like, for example, in Handel's Messiah, I have seen that basically alto and countertenor can both do the same
Right.
and I was wondering whether it's always like this, whether you can always stand for alto.
Yes, that's typically the standard, is that if there's an alto solo and it's within the repertoire that is appropriate for countertenor. So never, like, countertenors would never sing Wagner, for example. Doesn't work. That work is way too large and loud, and you would never hear a countertenor. But you can do that. Like that, typically a countertenor is considered in the same vein as a mezzo soprano, so those would be considered altos. There are countertenors that are sopranists, though. They do exist, and there are some that can, like Franco Fagioli. He sings on like unimaginable high notes. It's insane. He is a soprano. So they do exist too. I would say that there are, while there are not a lot of countertenors in the world, so you can't say there are a lot. I would say that more often than not, you find them singing alto rep. Even Franco Fagioli sings alto repertoire, even he does it, but he can sing ridiculous.
Do countertenors form a world underground club, like sort of the special ones?
I would say that there is a bit of that, because it's so small, we tend to all kind of know each other and who each other, is. Especially, I mean, I don't know so many that are abroad yet. I know them maybe from online, and talking that way, not having met them in person. But, I have a lot of countertenors that are in school that will reach out to me and, ask me advice, and I'll know who so-and-so is at this school or who's at this school. We know who each other, because there's not that many of us. It's not like sopranos where there are thousands and thousands of them, where it would be impossible to know everyone. I would say we probably all know each other, because there's not that many.
Well, now another question on the repertoire. So probably the repertoire should be sort of limited for countertenor. I expect the Baroque, and then it goes less and less with each century. Or how would you describe the repertoire?
I would say historically that is somewhat accurate there, although that is changing too. So I am doing actually a concert tour of Rossini next year, where I'm singing Rossini arias alongside a mezzo. We're going to kind of trade off. That repertoire is not really deemed countertenor repertoire, but anymore countertenors are doing more and more, because as the popularity for countertenor is progressing, the understanding of the voice and knowing what it can actually do is increasing as well, which is great. So we can do a lot more than people might think. It's not just Handel and Baroque stuff. It's not just Handel and Bach. We can do, I often sing the Bernstein treble solos in Chichester Psalms. And I often sing the Roasting Swan in Carmina Burana. There are lots of composers. There's, of course, Akhenaten, which is a new opera, but there's also Flight by Jonathan Dove, which has the Refugee, which is a countertenor role. There's, we have Britain that has the Oberon role. Yeah. There's lots of and then also Britain wrote some chamber works for countertenor. There's lots of composers writing for it now. So it's no longer just Handel and Bach, which is great. We're getting a chance to actually show that we are a full working voice that can do a lot more than what maybe the box people have put us in the past.
Well, now let's turn to your performance in Oberon. I actually happened also to see a production at the English National Opera. I forgot the name of the countertenor who was there, but
Tim Mead.
Cool.
Was it Tim Mead?
Oh, probably yes. It was this production, which was green, red, and blue only, like a beautiful production. I remember it. Well, anyway, but I want to talk about you. So my question is, could you describe to us the whole cycle of the rehearsal? What is challenging? How does your mind and your voice develop to prepare to the final set of performances? How do you go psychologically through performance? So sort of lead us through your rehearsal and performance cycle in an opera. And also your attention, where does it go to conductors, to conductor, to yourself, to your colleagues, to audience, maybe?
So yeah, that is, so for Oberon specifically, my process was to first figure out who I wanted him to be. So even though it's in English and I'm a native English speaker, that is Shakespeare English and not super accessible to my native tongue anymore. It's almost like a different language in itself. So you have to figure out what he is saying, what does Oberon want, and what do the other characters want? What does Titania want? What does Helena want? What are their motives? You have to figure that out even before I sing a note. You have to figure that out because that informs the music. Because we're not just doing a song. This is a whole story, and it all needs to be apparent to the audience, or if not, then you're not doing your job, as a performer and as a storyteller. So I first figured that out, and I decided I wanted Oberon to be A, really weird, a very strange man. B, very self-absorbed. He thinks he is the greatest thing on Earth, or whatever planet we're on. He thinks he's the most magical, powerful being in the world. So that comes with a bit of an ego, I would say. So much so that he thinks that he can steal, a child from Titania because he feels he's entitled to that changeling boy because I'm Oberon. Of course I deserve this because I'm. So he needed to be that, but I like to play him very creepy. Because if you look at the music and how Britten wrote it, there's lots of seconds and clashing sounds in the orchestration that would, to me, hint to a kind of a creepy, like, eccentric person. So that's what I decided I wanted him to be. I wanted him to be self-absorbed, creepy, and strong and self-important. So I decided that. So I looked at the libretto first and looked at the text and did my research there. Then with that work in particular, the hard part for me was making sure my rhythms and my pitches were correct. Because the way Britten writes, it's not so straight. It has interesting rhythmic themes and melodic themes that are, lots of tritones and things, something very different from Handel, and a lot of other composers, which is why he has such a distinct sound. I think his writing is beautiful. Britten might be my very favorite composer, but it's not the easiest to figure out at first. Once you start to dive into it, you can start to hear it more readily, but at first it's not the easiest. So that was my second goal, was to figure out and get it perfectly accurate, because I didn't want someone to listen to a recording later and say, well, this sounds nice, but these are not. Because it's very easy to get away with wrong pitches in music like that, because the audience won't often have everything totally memorized.
Yes, and especially because he has so many passages that are almost like speech-like.
Yeah, very almost like patter. You need it, it needs to be accurate. I did not want someone to listen to back and be like, well, this is nice, but this is a mistake. This is a mistake. You didn't get this rhythm right at all. Because I realized that, recordings and digital media are a huge part of our world now as classical musicians, and it will be recorded and it will be listened to again. Mm-hmm. And other people will be listening to learn from you, and you better teach them right. Because that's the new way. I mean, when my teacher was in school, they didn't have these, the internet to access all of these recordings of every, I could watch something from the English National Opera, but even if I don't live in England, I can watch it. They could never do that when they were in school. They could never listen to someone and see, what they did with it, but they can now. And that's going to be the new way people learn is, mm-hmm. I mean, they should still learn to be well-rounded musicians and read music. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but people will learn from your digital footprint, and it needs to be right. Because if not, I believe you'll have a reputation for singing beautifully, but not correct all the time. So I knew I wanted that. And then after that, it's more up to, once you get the characterization and you get the notes and all of the music solid, it's up to what you do in the rehearsal with the other musicians. So to build that opera, it does really, really matter the strength of the other characters and their ability to act Shakespeare and their knowledge of what they're doing, because everything they're doing informs you, and everything you're doing informs them. So everyone really needs to be top notch. They really need to be solid. And so that's where the ensemble process comes in. The teamwork aspect comes in. When I was doing that production in Canada, we were in rehearsal for several weeks, and that whole time we were just figuring out, because everyone came with the music learned, right? That's expected, I think. We were trying to figure out how so-and-so reacts to so-and-so, and getting that relationship, and the relationship between me and Titania, who is my wife, but at what level? It seems like, we're not on good terms.
And also you and Puck, right?
Yes, and Puck needs to be ever loyal, but at the same time, Oberon abuses him and mm-hmm. treats him poorly and drags him around. You need to develop that ability so that Puck almost is an extension of Oberon, and Oberon is almost an extension of Puck. So I got to the point I had a really great young boy actor who played Puck with me, who was quite good. He was very young, I think like 12 or something. Mm-hmm. But he was extremely good. And Puck doesn't actually sing at all in the production at all. He speaks in rhythm. It's very interesting how Britain did that, because it fits the character perfectly. But he was such a good actor, but he would almost never do the same thing twice. He would act it with the same intention, but in a different way, and maybe in a different place every time, because for him, it was spontaneous. For him, he really was Puck, which was fascinating to see. It was fascinating. I would love to do it again, and I would love to have him. He's older now, so he may not fit the profile, but it was really, really fascinating. But I got to a point where I knew what he was going to do, even though I didn't know what he was going to do, so that I could react instantly and lash out at him right away. Because it matters so much to know to know your scene partners so well that you already know what they're going to say back. Mm-hmm. Not just because it's written in the score, but because you know them so well and you have locked into that energy so deeply that you can expect.
Do you have to know the conductor as well? Like as well as your stage partners?
I say yes, but in a different way. The conductor is extremely important, especially in a production like that. but in any production, the conductor is very important. I don't think anyone would disagree and say we don't need conductors. They need conductors. For one, they keep the ensemble together, but Midsummer Night's Dream can be tricky to count. There are sometimes long passages of music that is just repeated constantly, and you can lose track of where you are, and you don't want to be on stage going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. You don't want to be doing that. The conductor is there to tell you when to come in. It's very important that you have that trust there. And I've never had a conductor yet that I didn't trust to bring me in. But you also need a conductor to say, you know, who trusts you enough as a singer and as a musician to know that they don't have to bring you in every single time. You know, I would tell, for that production in Canada that I did, I would tell the conductor, listen, right here, I would really like a cue. And he would say, and then, he would say, okay, I'll write it in here. Logan needs a cue for this. And then other parts, I didn't necessarily need him. He was just there as a safety net. And if something happened, things happen. And then other times he would say, I'm doing a lot right now with the orchestra. I can't really cue you. I need to cue them. And so then it's kind of up to me to listen to his musical cues to know when to come in. It's all of that pre-planning so that you know that you can be successful when it goes up, because I do not like winging it on the stage. I'm not someone who wings it. I cannot just fly by the seat of my pants. I really like to know how it's going to go.
So basically, there are no shortcuts.
No, no, you cannot. There's no shortcuts in anything in life. If you want it to be great, you have to see it through all the way. There's no shortcuts in anything great in life, and it especially applies to music. I mean, I think audiences now realize more and more how much hard work it is to put on a production. But if you don't live it and see it yourself, you'll never really realize just how many months and months of preparation before the rehearsal process go into learning it, on your own and bringing it together at the rehearsal. There's no shortcut. If you shortcut it, you can tell if someone shortcuts. You can just smell it in an instant.
A quote, let's put it in the quote box.
Yeah.
No shortcuts. Well, how about competitions and the performances? Is there anxiety, stage fright, sort of ups and downs psychologically when you are under pressure, say at competition, to perform with with other competitors, and at the performance just perform well for the audiences that you say might also see you on the recordings afterwards? So how do you deal with this pressure and responsibility?
So competitions have been quite important for me in my career. It's not always important. There are singers who, have great careers who never won a competition for whatever reason. Doesn't mean they're not great singers. But competitions for me have been quite helpful in getting me, out there and getting me, continual work and getting more work after the competition. That's been really, really helpful. I think other countertenors would also agree. Maybe perhaps competitions are a way for countertenors to kind of prove their worth in the business, maybe more so than other their voice types. I'm not sure. Lots of voice types win competitions all the time, and I think the popularity of doing competitions shows that it's very helpful towards a career. As a singer, for me, they've certainly been quite helpful. It can be stressful, but not really for me, it's not really any different than the normal stress of just doing any kind of performance on a stage. I don't really think, oh, they're judging me right now, because even if it's not a competition and it's an opera or a concert with an orchestra, everyone's sort of judging you. Anyway, they're trying to see what you're going to do. And I like to look at competitions as a way to show, everything that I can do, everything that makes me unique, everything that makes me special. I can do this, you know, messa di voce, listen to me do it. It's an opportunity to show all of the skills you've honed in practice and in study. It's an opportunity. I like to view it that way. It's like, now it's time to show them everything I know that I can do when I'm at home by myself.
Mm-hmm.
Time to show it. I find it quite exhilarating. I find it quite fun. I think it's actually why I keep going back for competitions, is because I really like when it's successful. It's the greatest feeling in the world.
Is there any glamour part of your profession, like fans, gifts, flowers, attention, admiration? How do you deal with it?
There is some parts of it can be glamorized. There are, you know, fans and people who follow you online and who love your work, and that's all very flattering. I am, of course, not Maria Callas yet. Yet, I say. You know, I don't have throngs of people following me like, you know, she had. And, you know, but you do get to meet really interesting people. The other thing is you get to go to amazing places that other jobs don't take you, you know. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, Hawaii. I did Alcina in Hawaii. Mm-hmm. I got to go to Hawaii for free. Who gets to go to Hawaii for free, you know? You have to pay.
Elvis Presley.
Yeah, I get to go and see, you know, beautiful places and meet new people and experience new cultures, and that all is very, very appealing for me. I love to travel, so doing this as a career has been very rewarding in that way, because I get to see some amazing places because of what I do, and I'm not at an office where, you know, I wake up, I go to the office, I come home, and that's what my life is. And if I want to go see somewhere else, I have to go take a vacation. I get to almost have vacations at work, and that's really, so that is really, really great. I actually really enjoy all aspects of that, all of it. It's never a drag for me. I love to travel. I never get bothered by any of that. I love all of that, so that's all a plus for me.
I've never been to Hawaii, so I am very envious. Well, I must say I've never been to New York either. So, well, let's finish on some earthly notes. We have 7 minutes. Could you tell me, what is the situation in America? Do you think that orchestras and opera houses would follow the Met and the New York Phil in not opening till next year?
I fear that may be the case. I wish that it was not. Again, going back to what I said at the beginning of our conversation, I think everyone is learning, whether or not they admit it, that we have not, in the classical music world, by and large, have not capitalized on the media aspect of performance. We haven't really capitalized on making a profit from digital performance. We haven't done that. And now it's almost too late, because now is no money. There is no, because everyone, you know, is in a slump financially from not doing performances, to really set up and get all of that running. It should have been done beforehand. Of course, we never knew this would happen, but the signs, I believe, were there, because if you look at every other mainstream art form, they are online. You see painters who publish their works on Instagram and have massive followings, and they sell a lot of their works from their online platform. You know, there are pop singers and all of those people that do online concerts. I mean, Lady Gaga, who is one of the most recognized names, just did like a full album release online, and people bought tickets to do this. It's called Chromatica. It was wildly successful. I think if we want to try to open up sooner, we're going to have to think outside of the box. I think we're going to have to do something different. It cannot be the same production of Lava Wem that we've been doing for 15 years. It needs to be different. We need to mix mediums. We need to mix types of performances, singing with dancing, singing with digital media, digital art forms. I think we need to do those things so that we can sell the audience on something new, because there are so many ways to, I believe there are so many ways to come out of this stronger and with a better understanding of how to proceed, because digital media is not going away. I think we need to embrace it and need to see everything we can do. If, it would be really nice if the Met Opera had a YouTube page where they could broadcast, YouTube live, because other YouTubers, YouTubers are this new wave of careers where they have Patreons, where people pay monthly subscriptions to have an inside access to that YouTuber's life. Mm-hmm. How interesting would that have been if the Met could offer monthly subscribers access to these stars in like a YouTube live interview, like, almost like we're doing right now, but we could do that with Anna Netrebko or anyone else who, mm-hmm. That would be something that they could utilize and help keep the doors open, and keep performances, running during this time. And the Met, it's not just the Met that could do this. Anyone can do this. YouTube is free to everyone. You could really, really do that. And I think that we need to start to utilize those tools that are at our disposal, because they're not just for pop and mainstream artists. They're not. They're for everyone, and we can all figure out how to use them. And I would really like to see that happen.
What do you think about VR and XR? Like yesterday, I saw a cyber concert from Helsinki when a pop singer performed in a studio, and then they put her in a made-up VR surroundings so that we see her singing in some magic forest.
I personally think that's phenomenal. I think that's extremely interesting. Of course, it will never take the place of live theater. I'm not saying that we should replace it. I'm saying we should do this instead for now. Because we can't have live theater with this virus everywhere. It makes it very difficult to have large audiences. I think that virtual reality concert is phenomenal. I also think that there's a way that we can do that with opera. I think that would be awesome. I think that's really captivating. I think people would tune in to see how that would work.
Yeah, and even if there was like a small payment, say $2, yes,
yeah,
I think they pay. Yeah,
a pay-per-view situation. Like they do lots of. There are lots of events, sporting events that are pay-per-view, and people would get used to it. Of course, athletes and athletic supporters would say there's nothing that replaces being at the game in real life, but people watch sports online all the time. I think can be the same for opera and for classical music. I really do. That's just my 2 cents. It might not be the most popular opinion, but I really do think that there is something that we can do besides just laying down and accepting defeat.
Well, I actually think your ideas are extraordinary, and we should discuss them maybe in future. But now we have only 1 minute left, which is usually to say thank you. And I send you a greeting from St. Petersburg. Come to perform in our city.
Oh, I would love to. I would love that.
And I also would like to go to New York, but now maybe after the Met reopens.
Yes, I think that would be wise. But thank you so much for having me. I really, really enjoyed this. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you. I will now save it on my page and then put it on YouTube, so we could share it with others who didn't have time to watch it.
Absolutely. I would love to do that. Yes. Thank you so much. It was such a great experience.
Yes, thank you. And please stay healthy, continue training, and I hope to see you in person. someday.
Yes, I do too. Hope to see you in person one day. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.